Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back for another recap from the series Shogun, which today we're going to be recapping episode 4, the Eightfold Fence. Nani and I are going to start this recap off by giving you a review, letting you know just our general thoughts about the episode, and then we'll get into the episode a little more by different scenes or events of the episode, the big ones at least. Yeah, this episode was a blast, wasn't it, Nadia?
It was good. It's crazy because it wasn't too much action.
Yeah.
But story-wise, oh man, stuff is plotting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of shady people involved, as if it wasn't already very very evident that folks were looking to backstab everybody, but also ultimately everybody's just trying to protect their own, it seems like. But yeah, there's definitely a lot to really break down on this episode. I thought this episode was good. I don't always say that episodes are dependent on action in order for it to be good. There's a lot of story being told in this episode, and I also always appreciate, because we sort of ride this vehicle of being by the lens of the character of Blackthorne, because we're sort of outsiders to the culture. So like seeing how he's learning more about the cultures, the do's, the don'ts, learning Japanese, I'm kind of like enjoying that. But then also at the same time too, I'm also enjoying that Mariko is showing a level of interest in terms of which in his case was the English, his culture, his background. What is it like to be back in London, but also learning military strategies? And she's just noting it all down. She's certainly a strategist. So I definitely enjoy a very strong episode 4 that's really ramping things up for this 10 episode season. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed this episode. Any other comments for you in terms of review before we actually get into the specifics here?
I think in this one we're starting to see, I guess, John's usefulness. He's resourceful. We're starting to see how he's starting to I guess kind of serve his purpose and how they can use him. So I'm excited to see, because I really like seeing like war strategies and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think I think it's safe to say, for everything that this show has really given us in terms of its production and just world building, I used the word epic, but I think like for me, and maybe this is a little biased, but like when you really get down to like seeing war strategies in the war field, that's when I stamped the word epic on it instantly. When you really start to see how big things could get in terms of not only just the cast that's involved and the number of bodies that's visible, but like seeing the different moving parts. I mean, this episode really just took the production just to another level, considering where things could go. Because by the end of this episode, I think it's very clear. We agree with you, Mariko, that war is coming. And so let's get into this episode, and definitely, folks, get in the comments. Y'all let us know some of your favorite moments in this episode, anything that we miss. I know there's folks that had read the books or the novel and been really enjoying what they've been able to bring to the screen. Give us all of that feedback and comments in the comments below. Okay, so let's break this episode down now. We're gonna start off at the top here, where there is where we're in Jiro, and we're seeing that there is a notice from Ahsoka that Toranaga is coming, and Lord Omi prepares for his visit, knowing that not only is there a sense of loyalty to Toranaga, but also ultimately there's going to be some interesting developments from this, because Toranaga, while there may be some people on his side, there's also a lot of folks kind of in the middle, not really sure how to shift. But nonetheless, him coming is definitely going to be worth the preparation of his military presence, his people, and they're going to see what the divide. We obviously got to see what the divide is among that. Some folks were excited, some people were kind of like, I don't know. But anyway, nonetheless, because we know this was where we were going to have the training, the gun regiment training for war done by Blackthorne. But anyway, here nor there, we'll come back to that in a second. We're back on the ship here, and Mariko who is making sure that everybody knows that Blackthorne is now the Hatamoto. So, he done got his promotion here. And such folks should acknowledge that, which by this promotion, he will need a consort. Well, Fuji, on the other hand, who's being tasked for this duty here, is like, no, not me. Please get me out of this. I don't want to do anything. No. But I think what's interesting about this is just seeing how persuasive Mariko is, because even with Fuji, who's really lost everything, lost her husband and her son, and just pretty much at this point now, don't have her father, don't have much to do or to or purpose. But this sort of just gives her that purpose, whether she was able to recognize it pretty early or not. But nonetheless, Mariko definitely let Toranaga know that, yeah, she'll be doing that 6 months for you. But anyway, as I mentioned, now that the ship has gotten to Ajiro, we do see that the army awaits and everybody is there celebrating and cheering and roaring for Toranaga. Meanwhile, there seems to be, some indifference about Toranaga and what's going to happen with him, because Toranaga's going to quickly do a cameo here, let everybody know what he's going to do, and then he's going to leave. But, the whole idea is that because, one, there's a question, there's also sort of a price tag on his head, but even at that too, he has some level of protection. I mean, they really broke it down last episode in the terms of them not being able to impeach him because they don't have enough members on the council, but it doesn't mean that folks aren't going to try to go after him one way or another. So Toranaga seems to have found this loophole by resigning, per se. So without 6 people, they can't impeach him. So got to kind of see what happens until do they potentially nominate somebody else, or what's going to happen? So anyway, the Toranaga story really isn't the focus of this episode. It's really about everybody else. So this is literally like our first episode where we really get to see other characters really start to come to purpose here. But anywho, Blackthorne coming back to a familiar place that we know, which in this case, he's not shy about that as well too. So, the barbarian returns. People are just like, wait, what? Because my man went from like literally being the scum of the earth to now being the Hatamoto and having a house. And so, not everybody's so happy about it, but he's also not shy about how he felt about them too, because at this point now he tries to get respect, in which he says, pardon me in Japanese, and he absolutely calls him a shit rag in English. And I just love how Mariko is just absorbing all of this and just kind of keeping a straight face. What sort of was your thoughts sort of about seeing John really have no problems returning receipts here, and the little bit of small humor that we get from him in moments like this?
Yeah, I think John is always kind of smart in how he like maneuvers, but at the same time, like he doesn't hold his tongue, and like he'll still kind of fight his way, and he's still asking about his men. Mariko kind of like, I'm wondering if they're even telling him the truth, but Mariko's like that they're safe, they're in another place right now. But this is our mission right now solely. We have to focus on this. And I feel like Mariko, she's like a strategist in everything she does. She's always calm and collected. We've never seen her, like, even when her husband died, like, she's always like smart and kind of like keeping people in their place and their positions, like how she even expressed to the council, the consort. She was like, I lost my husband, but this is my purpose. I trust Toranaga, and this is our purpose. Like, we still always have to serve our purpose. And same thing like with John. She's like, you're here. This is the mission. We got to train everybody about the guns. Like, that's why we're here. We'll get your men later.
Yeah, and honestly, I think like, the one thing you can take about Mariko is really before the end of this episode is that like she definitely leads by loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
There's never going to come a question or anything in between, but between a Toranaga order or a level of loyalty shown to him. So like, I think we've seen that on display, obviously, in the first episode when Fuji's husband, who was very loyal as well, ended up, the measure of disrespect that occurred, just shows you just how far folks will go. And I think that Mariko is very much another person who just does it in a different way. You know, she always makes sure that he's priority over everything. But yeah, she's definitely a master strategist, and man, I tell you, just unbothered to the utmost. Like the best poker face in this entire series here. But yeah, with that happening too, you know, we do get now, you know, this small moment between Yabushige and Toranaga, and then obviously Ami here, or Omi. And again, while there is a measure of like an alliance and respect, and Toranaga's really pumping everybody up, and you know, he has these folks that are ready to follow him. You know, yeah, the whole village was there. It's interesting because John was kind of just like, yeah, are we sure everybody's on the same page? So there's been like this very ominous feel about everybody, even to the point that like, I think it's the viewers, you can tell that there's something off, but ultimately you really can just see that like at any given point, folks are really always going to go for their best interest. And I was never sold on and honestly, I don't know how sold I am just now, like with Yabushige, because at the end of the day, you know, with the actions he made in this episode, he smiles too much for me, and his smiling makes me uncomfortable because I feel like he's like sleazy and just going to say and do anything in order to like get out of the predicament. But he did say later that he said, like, I can't believe I'm giving my life for this guy by talking about Toranaga. But like, beginning of this episode, by no means was I very comfortable in not thinking that there was going to be some backstabbings of sorts happening in this town. John had the suspicion, you know, there's always like Toranaga's in the front, and then there's always minor chatter behind his back. And we've seen it in a couple of scenes. So I don't know. We're going to have to kind of see how these pieces kind of shift, because at the end of the day, Toranaga is definitely trying to get everybody on his side in spite of Ishido, and will these folks be able to stay loyal no matter what? And well, without
I'm
getting
wondering
ahead.
what his mission is, because Toranaga leaves on business. Like, he's not really, like you said, the central focus in this episode. He's gone most of it. So I'm wondering, like, is he setting other things in place, or was this like some kind of test? Like, oh man, I have so many questions.
Yeah, and listen, when we talk about John's men, I think they're protecting him, and I think it's almost a measure of collateral too. It's like they can help me. I can either use them for, you know, whatever it may be, but also they can protect me, and also I can use it as a measure of collateral back for John if he tries anything while I'm gone. Because I think at the end of the day, they are absolutely valued. You know, we've seen how they can navigate on as a sort of a naval strategist, as John was talking about. So we've seen how they operate on a boat. We know that they got weapons and guns and all that other stuff. And you know, there's definitely benefit to them being on their side. And with a man that everybody is out for, why not have that extra protection that folks may not see coming? So I think that's why they were not shown, because he had bigger protective plans with them. But nonetheless, as you mentioned, Blackthorne, he's looking for his folks. He wants his guns. He wants his people. He's forbidden to board his own boat without permission. And that's all he wants. He wants his guns. He wants his men. And here's Mariko, man, because like, I love her. First of all, I just got to just be like brutally honest here. Anna has just been fantastic in this role. And I've just loved her as an actor. So I'm so biased towards any character that she plays. It's just like, I like her, you know? But I can't help but to think she, with her loyalty to Toranaga, absolutely gives me like the, I don't know how much I can trust her type of person, because she was very much like, I need you to know, I know we had a deal, but everything belongs to Toranaga. So don't even question this. Let's just move on, you know?
And she's very quick to say to refuse is an insult. So I'm always wondering, is everything like part of like Japanese culture? Like, is everything part of like the loyalty and like being respectful? Or sometimes is she just using that to persuade him to like follow like what Toranaga wants?
True that. And I mean, and that's what, again, that's just what I appreciate about this, because, you know, throughout this episode, we see John learning the language, learning the culture, going to his house. So many little things that, I'm sure somebody who's like fully immersed in this culture probably is picking up on. But for me, there's like such a learning curve here in terms of just etiquette and just everything that you do. So like, yeah, and that's again goes to my suspicion, because I'm just like, is she being 100 with him with this, or is this like some type of mild level of manipulation in order to ensure that he's aligned with whatever Toranaga needs? Because again, he's overly valuable. We've seen the vast effect that he was able to bring to this army. And with her being the catalyst of all of this, it has to go through her in order for this to work. As the translator, as sort of just like the educator, like she has to make this all happen.
Almost too, like, I don't trust Yabushige and his people. So maybe his men aren't even alive, and this could kind of just be like a, let's hold this against him and like make him think that, so we can use him and he'll train our men and let him think that he'll get them back, because we still have not seen them since, was it the first episode?
Yeah, agreed, totally agree on that one. So anyway, as John, and the one thing about John, he's not combating. He stakes his point, they state their point, it's on to net. So I still feel at times John feels like he's captive, because he's like, I want my men, I want my guns. He's like, you did agree to train the men. He's like, all right, cool. Okay, yeah, that's all right. I did. Let's get to that.
Yeah, he even said like, oh, this is nicer accommodations, but he still felt like prisoner.
Exactly. And I that mentality is definitely going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out throughout this. And he's still reluctant in terms of accepting Fuji as his consort, which is, as you mentioned to her, as she said, that's an insult. But we know that page turns later on in this episode. As you mentioned with Yabushige and Omi, they want to know who leaked the word about Blackthorn's ship to Toranaga. See, it's these conversations in these moments. I'm just like,
they plotting.
This whole group of haters right here, just in the background hating. But yeah, they definitely plotting. But anyway, he also, I mean, and again, this is why you can't trust him, because Yabushige is like, all right, cool. So Ishido definitely thinks I am, a backstabber, a traitor. But as Oni sort of puts into perspective here, what if you provide him the guns and the cannons, and that makes peace with all of this? You know what I mean? He's kind of thinking like, yeah, but again, I think like it does show you like the mass level of intelligence of all of these different leaders here, because he wasn't able to really understand just how much power he has with the bodies. Now learning this strategy here, they're all, and I get it, they're all Toranaga's folks. But yeah, at the end of the day, you're actually more of a threat to Ishido than giving him a peace offering and equipping him with this. Makes him easily the most powerful person, but he wasn't able to put that all together here. But again, next part is again, more lessons in the culture, learning how to talk, learning how to walk, the use of the console, all these different things here. And as I mentioned, just everything that like Fuji has been through, like being aware why this is meaningful to her, because she lost her husband, and son was put to death. It's just all these things, and I think it is showing a humane side of Blackthorn, to not be so reluctant into change. And again, I think we still always got to remember, like, he still feels mentally prisoned, and obviously he misses his people, he misses his home and stuff like that. He misses his way of how he goes about it. But I think he's starting to like lower that wall down a little bit to like engage in the culture and accept folks. And I think that level of empathy is shown later on in the episode as he does his very smooth way of trying to make peace with how things are. Hey, has anybody ever given you a gun to tell you that they were sorry?
Please take this. I mean, I do have samurai swords though.
Okay. But anywho, just again, small things about the consult that we're not familiar with, like she can't sleep if you're awake, type of thing. Um, and again, it goes back to Mariko just really being a wild card, because she's at times it seems like she's just always against him and stern. But then in this scene, it's the scene where like she's like laying down the law, hey, you're not supposed to be on the grass, all these different things, and then she offers him a gift of the guns, which is like, this is something he wanted. She retrieved it for him on the low against probably everybody's suggestions here, and does it for him. So it's like, one minute you're like scolding him, and then next minute you're just like, but here, as much as I had focused about John sort of like giving in, it seems like we're starting to see Mariko start to like lower her guards emotionally, and there's definitely some moments in there we're going to talk about, but it's starting to see her poker face starting to like kind of cripple a little bit. What did you think about this scene of her offering him the guns? And obviously we'll talk about that next scene in 1 second, but like, what sort of was your thoughts? You just like, wait, what? Here's the guns. Like, how did this all come about? What was you thinking?
Yeah, it was definitely like we had to like go back for a second. It happened like on the low, like it was like so quickly. But basically, like, John is complaining, like he's just outside, he's walking on the moss, and she's like, you can't do that, that's disrespectful. And I think in this moment he's really just like we were saying, like he still feels like a prisoner, like, oh, this lady's freaking following me everywhere. It's like that whole like, I can't take a shit in a bathroom without someone standing by kind of attitude. Like, but then Mariko seems to always have like, I don't know, like words of wisdom, and like can calm him down. Yeah. So I don't know, I think it was just I didn't expect the guns at all.
She's a wild card, man. I just don't. At one minute you'd be like, man, I think if given the right opportunity, she would probably try to kill this guy, but also at the same time probably still loves him or likes him or something of that sort. Like, she's so unpredictable. Which immediately after this scene, Omi and his folks have gotten word that they got the guns. So for breakfast, we got a little bit of a standoff here, which is weird, because Mariko's like, give him the guns. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You just gave him the guns, but
that was confusing.
This goes back to your theory of like, there seems to be a measure of testing going on, and I can't make sense of it. But from that scene to this scene, I'm kind of like, you definitely gave him the guns. You wouldn't give him the guns knowing what was going to come and not be prepared for that, especially with you being the strategist that you are. So I don't know who you were testing, or was this a sign of loyalty from the consult? Was she aware that Fuji would do what she would do, which I thought that was dope. But like, nonetheless, yeah, we get this little standoff here, and they want the guns. He ain't giving up the guns, and Fuji, as a consult, says, listen, I'm willing to give my life for it to defend the guns, which I was kind of like, well, that is not what I expected, but here we go. And even in this moment too, John getting another little bite in there, because with the utmost respect that Mariko translated, yeah, John definitely didn't have those same words for Omi, and he definitely was just like, listen, I'm not going for it. Like, he's gonna drop that, he gonna disrespect somebody if he has to. But nonetheless, to get through this scene, giving Fuji the guns and the surrender, Fuji draws the guns, and then they bow, and then they leave. I think there's a measure of respect for her, but also I think because, like, at this rate now, this little hold off was just going to just go much further than it needed to. But it did gain John sort of liking and pleasing to Fuji, and that was just kind of the start of, of their friendship. Yeah, the loyalty and yep. So anyway, we get now Blackthorne on the battlefield, and he's being told, like, listen, man, we bought these guns, these muskets 50 years ago. Don't need help cleaning and loading them. We don't want the basics. We want to understand tactics. And I thought this was funny, because when he mentioned the Great Siege of Malta, I was like, yeah, but wait, you didn't serve in that, because no matter whatever I was trying to calculate, I was like, there's no way he was in that. Plus, we already know that he's really not trained like they think he is. You know, he says he's more of a naval person. So it was interesting that he brought his naval strategy on land, but he also said it could be used on the water. So he's very shifty and crafty to get his way out of something because, you know, Mariko, who easily could have just bombed him out and was like, yeah, this guy doesn't know anything. But she paused and recollected, tried to figure out how she was going to play this out. But they were able to kind of work collectively to get out of that minor on the hot seat in terms of not delivering what was promised, as they want to know tactics that their enemies would not be familiar with. Because if you go and learn what the folks of England is doing, this isn't a same type of strategy and fight plan that may have been that's occurring in Japan. But as he mentioned with her poker face, how about cannons? And they're like, cannons, no. Cannons aren't accurate. It doesn't work. We tried it some years ago. I, to myself, said cannons don't work, are not accurate. I don't know what he's about to get at here. When they implemented the cannons, when we first saw him saying this is what he wanted to show them and teach them and stuff, did you think at any point that this will be a success?
I guess I was wondering what he was gonna pull off, because Yabushige.
Yabushige?
Yeah, Yabushige was like, the Portuguese brought us guns years ago. They're experienced. They already know how to clean the barrel. Like, why are you here? So they're wanting him to fail already. And he's basically like, tactics. Like, what kind of tactics? What can we do? And they're like, what do you know? So he reminds them, like, I'm a sea pilot. All right, let me go what I know for. So gun tactics are clearly pointless. So he was like, oh, let's think about like naval combat. What do we do? So I think this was a good scene because he's kind of showing now, like, oh, all right, we actually can use this guy, because I don't think anyone had faith in him. So this was like a good way for him to show, like, I know the sea, I can navigate the sea, but I also know some like fighting, like combat strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's improvising on the fly. And I think like they know that there could be benefit. Obviously, the blessing from Toranaga. And obviously, there's this whole mystique of who this person is and what England could do. You know, everybody knows that the British has, you know, been the staple of war for many centuries here. And now that you got this person that's willing to teach us something. And it's always a weird thing. If you've ever tutored anybody or tried to get somebody hip to something, that first 5 to 10 minutes is very like rough, because you're like, where do I start? Like, all right, you said not the basics, so where do we kind of jump in on this at? And that was kind of him kind of figuring like, okay, I referenced a very prominent war, the Great Siege of Malta, absolutely iconic. This is a good talking point. They're like, we don't care about that. You didn't serve, so that doesn't mean nothing to us. Like, all right.
Yeah, Mariko's like, don't think we're stupid.
Right. And like, you know, again, this is where, you know, Mariko kind of has to navigate this for him, you know. But she's like, we want to know something that you're actually in. And I can see benefits in both of this. But like for them to be like, we don't want to hear anything that you know about that you wasn't in. Like the fact that she was able to put that together really fast too, just shows you how brilliant she is. But again, ultimately him being able to think on the fly and able to deliver something to them, get the cannons, teach them the cannons, that cannon knowledge and skill is invaluable to them now. They absolutely got the upper hand and it's working and accurate. So kind of mind blowing to see how that came about. Had no clue what was going to come at the end of this episode. But anywho, he's still learning Japanese. Mariko's going over his journal. Seems like she had some questions about it, but she brings it right back up because they do have this talk in this very beautiful setting here where the earthquake happened. But this is just the two of them getting familiar. But also, I think it's a little more insight into like Mariko's mindset and understanding that like death is in the air. We all know it's coming. That's just how it is here. He's a little bit different. As an outsider, it's like, what is this earthquake? What does this mean? What is this logic? Why are everybody sort of just content with their life being on edge of death? You know, so again, very beautiful scene that they had the two of them. But I think while it was a lot of educating each other, this was them kind of being comfortable with each other. This was a little bit of an opening of like emotions to each other. Omi and Kiko. Kiko talking about them cannons again. But as you mentioned, said everybody's been uneasy since Yabushige's here, your uncle here. So getting the two of them talking, because kind of understanding how the two of them operate, her interest into like the state affairs and whatnot. So I think there's probably more for her to come, because they definitely, besides the sex and seeing their relationship, I think it's not only is a state of just mental balance for Omi and somebody like another set of consciousness for him, but ultimately just like somebody he's safe with. But anywho, Mariko.
I was gonna say, and everyone's plotting because she was like, "If you were our lord."
Yep.
So I'm like,
Everyone.
he might even take out his own uncle.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm glad you picked. I'm glad you got that in there.
It's like now the Game of Thrones like pieces of done.
So true. So true. So Mariko's looking in sort of pleasure and desire seeing Blackthorne with the cannon. She's looking like, that's when the poker face is starting to lower again. We're seeing her start to be slowly charmed by this guy. And I just knew it was only a matter of time before they have something going. But anywho, Jozen shows up. One of Lord Ishido's men, all of his men are there. And they want Yabushige to return to renew his loyalty to the consul, which you had to not, either you were blind or you just do not know what was going on in this entire series to know that this is not good business for him. The fact that he had to come back, you already knew that this meant that there was going to be a price to pay, because his loyalty is in question. As he mentioned earlier, he probably think that Ishido probably thought that he's on the side of Toranaga and aiding him and all this other stuff. Him going back is going to be much more than a membership renewal. So him thinking on the fly, I was like, you know what? Let's bring Jozen people in. Let's give them a good night's stay. We'll teach them what we got tomorrow. This is where, like, again, where we see somebody that is willing to almost do anything to not meet death.
Yep.
And he's very sleazy, always smiling people's face, like, yeah, just stay, no problem.
See the barbarian.
Yeah, we got the barbarian. Look what he's doing for us, type of thing. That very important to note, that this guy is willing to do anything to get himself out of trouble. Even to the point of completely compromising everything that they're building and establishing here. So, and then it's funny because he looks over at who we're finally starting to get more of Nakakoto, the son, Nakakoto. And he says, like, I would give my life for your father, which is funny because he says Nakakoto. That, and he also is like, I can't believe I'm giving my life for this man, and talking to Omi. So, like, there's definitely like this guy is just lost in the sauce and just kind of just going with the flow of whatever it's going to be. But nonetheless, just kind of going through more stuff of this culture. Blackthorne looking at the food. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that in all of this, they did mention that Nakakoto talk about there may be a solution in terms of how he can handle this, because was it might have been Omi who said it. Well, either way, somebody said there's going to be a solution for what's happening, because again, everybody's plotting to get themselves out of Lord Ishido's men and Jozen, knowing that like this could be completely bad for everybody, knowing what they're doing with the cannons, but also because Yabushige would have to return to renew his membership there. But yeah, going back to Blackthorne, more with the culture, talking about the food, learning the food. The food does look good. I've also had natto before. Natto, I forget how you pronounce it, but the beans rice, I've had that before. Didn't know what it was called, but I was like, I've had that meal before. And again, him apologizing to Fuji for his actions, giving her the gun. Then she gifts him with 2 samurai swords, which belong to her father, which now goes back to this other notion, is that you must accept these. I know it. I mean, listen, you'd say, here's my father's sword. I'm like, no, too. That's like a lot of responsibility and pressure. But he mentioned that, and listen, as the Hatamoto, you gotta carry swords. You really
it's
can't.
Not proper. It's like walking around without a shoe. I don't know.
Yeah, like you got to, my guy. And so yeah, he takes it. He accepts the honor and so on, because at one point he's like, wait, did I disrespect her? And I knew it wasn't disrespect, because I think Mariko probably would have said something like, "Oh, that wasn't what you should say," or "That's not how you should do that." But nonetheless, whatever. Going back to Nakagoto, who's again Toranaga's son, this is where it really gets interesting because we get this man talk about everybody thinks I'm useless, and we don't want the word of our weapons getting back to Ishido. Bing, bing, is clicking. I like this because we're starting to see this character who is basically just being escorted around and being protected at the utmost. And yeah, we get the whole story about that because, ultimately you can kind of predict where his arc is going to go, and how valuable he is as his mission here, as his father's mission. But what did you think when he was having this conversation with Omi and he was saying, like, everyone thinks I'm useless. They don't, we don't want the word to get back about our weapons. And ultimately talking about how I'll handle this. And he doesn't want the word to get back to his father. But he seems like he's going to step up to put something together. This seems very ominous to the utmost. But what were you thinking when the two of them was having that conversation?
I don't know. I guess I didn't expect his son to take charge like that, and I'm happy he did because obviously no one else can be trusted. And I feel like throughout like the episode we kind of saw that like the son does not trust them. Because you could just tell they're always plotting and full of it. And I think once he saw I always forget Yabushige talking to Jozen, he was like, no, something's up. Like he's clearly trying to like finagle his way, like to get in there, like in a, what's the term? Like to get on like their good side. And I could tell he was just like, I'm not having that. Like you're not disrespecting my father anymore. But I'm curious as to what's gonna happen next in regards to that. Like if he's gonna tell his father what happened, or I feel like a whole lot is gonna happen with that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, by the end of this episode here, we know like his actions will absolutely get to his father. But I think it is going to be a measure of who's going to be responsible for like colluding with him and making this happen, which is definitely going to bring attention on Omi because he was told not to tell his father, should have told his father, probably could have prevented everything that's the war that's going to happen. But ultimately, he needs his son protected as the top priority. And this was not it. Completely reckless. But we'll talk about that. We're almost there at that scene in a second. Blackthorne, who loves a good swim, Mariko walks up on him and, talk about, Fuji being thankful for the gifts. And he's saying, I'm thankful for mine. I don't know. Did you think she was a little jealous here?
I don't know. I didn't know how to piece this together because at first it was like she's looking for him. So she's looking for him. Like this wasn't a coincidence.
Hell no.
I guess what it gets into later, I don't know. I was like, we're saying spoilers at this point. He sleeps with a different woman. So at that point I'm like, is she testing him? I don't know. I was like, she's trying to make him happy, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But that was like a beautiful moment with them. Like they both kind of let their guard down. And like, I realized like he even made like a metaphor. I was like, oh, he's trying to get some like romantic play in there. She was talking about like how, I guess we'll find out more later about what happened with her family, but she said she has another family name. And that like an injustice happened to her family. And basically he gave like a metaphor like about falling and raising houses and how she's like a strong, powerful woman. I was like, oh, okay, he got game. And then he starts like telling her about like his life in London and it's filthy. And she's like, oh, like basically intrigued by like such a different life. So I don't know. I felt like it was definitely an important, I guess, episode for their relationship because it's like a very private moment. But then like her setting in another woman, like, I was like, oh.
I gotta talk about that when you get there. Yeah, we're just about there. Yeah, I mean, her looking for him definitely was interesting, but I think she feels safe with him, whether she want to admit it or not. She finds liking to him. She wanted to know more about him and want to know about her. This is definitely an intimate intentions here because her finding him in the way she did definitely was like, oh, why are you here? And caught him getting in the water and stuff like that. Like, it wasn't, and obviously,
and the
if there's
playful,
anybody
like,
that should
finally
have been
taking a
behind
bath.
her. Yeah, it should have been Fuji behind him by the consult. So like her being there was kind of like, but she was like, yeah, she's very thankful for her. And she gave this like look. I was like, I feel like she might be judged. But yeah, Mariko talk about her past, her family name, well known in Japan. We're seeing flashbacks of some of the things she kind of been through. I looked it up too. The family name is Mitsuidi. I believe that's how you say it. Mitsuidi. And yeah, please, people be nice to me in the pronunciations here. But nonetheless, I did look it up just to see what it was, but I wasn't familiar. So whether you look it up or not, or whether everybody knows what's happening, I mean, obviously we'll have to be talking about this later on in the season. It's only 4 episodes in of a 10-episode season, so we got time to figure out more about that family story and everything that she's lost throughout this. But as you mentioned, yeah, he smoothed her over with her own logic about the rebuilding of the house and so on. So yeah, he charmed her, and he doesn't care about her past. I mean, that's all she needed to hear. But then she talks about taking her back to London and meeting the Queen here. At this point now, this is a whole day. But going into the next scene, he's sleeping now because he had a long time, a late night out on a date. And this entire episode, they really utilized low light shots. Because even when she brought in the guns, they shot it in a way that you couldn't basically almost see that she wasn't carrying anything. I know you said that she brought in a different woman. So first of all, Fuji leaves because he sleeps, so now she can sleep. That's a fact. We know it's her. She said goodnight in Japanese because that's what she speaks. The next person comes in. You don't think that it's Mariko. I do.
I had to turn my brightness up. I was like, is it me? It literally was like,
super
I had to turn
dark
my brightness
and ominous for a reason. And I think that's why he's kind of like in the next scene, talk about you seem to be in good spirits after a good night of company, a very thoughtful gift. And he's looking like, wait, what? And even Fuji's looking like, what are y'all talking about here? Because she wasn't aware of it, obviously, because she went to sleep. So who could it have been? Who could have?
I was trying to figure out some random
entered the chambers without Fuji knowing. And yeah, I think it was Mariko all the way. I know they're trying to make it dark to cast the doubt, and I know she's being tricky with her words because I don't think it's beneficial for them to know that they have slept together. What would that do? You know what I mean? What would that do?
So that must, I don't know. I want to go back now and like,
yeah, it's gonna
really turn the brightness like all the way and like.
and I think that's why they're really. I mean, the haircut is cut like hers. The clothing looked the same. She didn't have her jewelry on her, so it's hard to tell that. But I think it is her, and I think it's only a matter of time.
But also, like, all right, I need to rewatch that scene because I was like, I thought she left the room and then sent someone else in.
Yo, Fuji left the room. That's the thing. It's her job to ensure that John is asleep.
Because it literally just cut from them like having their moment at the water. And then he's going to bed. They say goodnight. And then another woman walks in the room. And I was like, wait.
Yeah. So here's how I'm looking at this. Mariko and John, the swim. He goes back. He sleep. Fuji says goodnight in Japanese because Mariko was speaking English. That's the biggest clue. She says goodnight in Japanese because that's her job. Because as we said earlier in the episode, she can't sleep unless you're asleep. So she's up, you're up. He sleep. She says goodnight in Japanese because now she can sleep. Closes the door. The door opens back up. Who's the only person that knows where he's at when he's asleep? The person that's rooming with him essentially in the same place is Mariko. It's all the way.
I thought she sent someone else in, but now I'm like, I need to rewatch this scene.
And again, I think she did that to kind of throw Fuji off, but also to not really make it established that they did something.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good look. I think it's a very strategical way of getting what you want without admitting to it. It plays perfect to her character. So I was like interested in how that went about. But we'll see if they ever come public in it. And I love how John's looking like, wait, what? Because he looked at it and thought it couldn't have been Fuji, right? And he's looking like, no. So, we'll see how that comes about. Anyway, back to the cannons, because it is time to put on a demonstration, and they are not happy that he's carrying swords, but whatever. But when this happens, they says, listen, with the display, we're going to have Nagakoto show. And Josen's kind of just, he played my guy. He's like, him? He could do some theater stuff, but not this. And then we see him do something else, and everybody's like, what is he about to do? And he basically tells Josen, your presence here, we don't like it, sir. And those cannons go off. And with it going off, it is a bloodbath. I'm going to sum all of this up, and then we'll talk about it, because this is completely brutal. I was just jaw dropped here. But we do get a mission of guilt, in terms of a mission of, I guess it's guilt, a mission of guilt. But nonetheless, Nagakoto did say, I ordered this. And then it said, your father. And he said, I want him to know. So, I mean, he's off the limb on this fully. And even to the point that Josen's like, this is not how samurais fight. And Nagakoto kills him. And even with Mariko and Blackthorne, Blackthorne trying to intervene, Mariko says no, but ultimately says this is war. And that's the end of the episode. But man, the cannons came through hella accurate, completely brutal. It is a bloodbath. When this gets back to Ishido, who his messenger is sent, and typically, messengers are sort of off hands in terms of this. So the fact that he dies and he's not going to return, and also Yabushige also is not going to be returning, trouble is coming. Mm-hmm. I cannot wait for next episode. Talk to me about the ending of this episode, your thoughts about it all.
So clearly John was not aware of this plan either, because he was like, what do I do? Do I stop them? Like, him, Mariko, they knew nothing. So Nagakoto had this whole thing set. Like, he must have probably talked to a few of the men that he knows are complete loyalists that will never betray his father. And he probably had them, and has to clearly have some knowledge as well of how to run the cannons. Like, he clearly was paying attention, because for them to be able to strategically have them placed in the correct place where they thought it was a presentation, and then it just hits Josen and them, like, whoo, that scene was beautiful. It was nice. And yeah. Everything, poor horses, but I always feel bad when it's horses, but everyone blew up. It was a beautiful scene. We got to get a lot of blood with that one. And then he Nagakoto also, I guess, chops his head after, because he's not dead yet, but he's clearly like, this is a message, like, you're not fucking with us.
Yeah, that, I mean, it shows the might of the cannons. It also showed in frustration that Nagakoto, who isn't just this bystander who can't do anything, Omi obviously had something to do with this as well too, in terms of the planning, because they had that talk that night. And then ultimately him being able to do that when it gets back to his father, not going to be good. There's going to be consequences for that, or who allowed that to happen. And then obviously the issues that's going to be coming from Ishido with this. So there's a lot that this episode sets up for the next episode. And with that, we'll put a pin in it and let you all do what y'all do in the comments and let us know your thoughts about this episode, the things you like, the things you didn't like, things we might have missed, other big parts of this episode and plot that you want to discuss. Get it all in the comments below as we get ready for next week episode 5, which should be crazy. If it's a 10 episode season, episode 5 is a mid-season episode, which means that expect things to go down. We're not going to see Toranaga just doing public affairs of just being happy and showing faces and rallying everybody up. He's going to want to know, number one, how did my son get involved with this? He's going to protect him, and Omi being involved with the planning. How does that look? And then obviously with Yabushige not going back, not that there's heat on him, maybe that gets him more aligned with Toranaga now, and the shadiness goes away, because now everybody's an enemy of Ishido going forward because of this. So
yeah, there's no redeeming himself after this
at all.
He's on the hit list.
Yeah, that's it. He did. That's a wrap. That's a wrap for my guy. But yeah, folks, let us know your thoughts about tonight's episode here. We'll see y'all back next week for another recap and review of the series Shogun. Thank you for watching, folks.